time last year, St. Louis was kicking off its 250th birthday celebration. It's doubtful anyone could have known what it would be like to turn 251. Then crime was down, startups were all the talk. We talked about disparities, inequities, and race, but now we wrestle with those issues. A birthday can be a good time to stop and think about the direction we're headed. So stay tuned. And on Stay Tuned, you drive the discussion. We bring local experts, journalists, and civic leaders together to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Tweet us your insights on tonight's topic, and you've got a seat at the table. With a few national experts and a panel of community members, this is the show bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. So stay tuned.
Ready? Yes. What's your last name, Michelle? Probably be coming out of bed at 4. 24
Okay, if you think birthdays, you might think birthday cake. If you think STL 250, you likely might think about 4-foot-tall plaster cakes. These two certainly did. Joining us to kick it off here, Meredith Jaworski, STL Cake Monster. Is that the name of your blog?
That's the name of my blog, yeah.
Okay, nailed it. You're going to see some photos that you guys took here. And Jason Voigt, St. Louis 250 Cake Lovers. You guys saw every cake, am I right?
That's
yes,
true.
A lot of people selfied with the cakes, but you guys got every single one of them. 254. I'm going to get to the bottom of why there are an extra 4 on the 250th birthday later. But what gave you the desire? Why did you want? What made you do this?
Well, I mean, for me, I was just so excited by the prospect of finding out about a place that I grew up in, but didn't know a whole bunch about the history. So I was really excited to just delve into that and drive around and take my puppy and my friends with me and get them excited about it too.
Same question. What gives you the motivation?
Well, when I saw my first one at the Hill, you know, I was out with a friend, and then I started taking pictures of that one, the Ragazzi's one, and by then I was hooked. I had to get them all, work out a plan, and I had my little Ozzie Smith figurine, which is seen on some of my cake pictures.
He was your gnome, if you will.
He was my prop, yeah.
I like it. So, okay, so what you bring up really the heart of the matter here. Did you explore, did you learn about a place that you didn't know? Do you know your town, if you will, the region, better?
I feel like I do. I recently blogged about the cake that was at the Spirit of St. Louis Airport, and that was right in my backyard. I grew up in West County, and I didn't know anything about that place before, and I learned about the names of the fields and how we acquired it and all that kind of stuff, and it just made me really proud, you know, that's in my backyard, so it was really, really exciting.
Any pride from your cake excursions?
Absolutely. I mean, I've learned so much about the history and the community. A lot of places I didn't even know that existed. I'm speaking for a lot of cake hunters out there. And plus, you know, a lot of stuff that's out on the outskirts, like the Black Madonna Shrine, that winery, you know, Mount Pleasant Estates. There's so many. Plus, a lot of places I've never been to in the past that I meant to go, like Merrimack Caverns.
Yeah, places you've heard of, places. It reminds me of how many people say, well, I haven't been to the Arch since I was a kid. That was 20, 30 years ago. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you for being here. Thanks for kicking us off with some pride, as you said. That was very good. Okay, so there's someone in the studio here who was responsible for these cakes. They were clearly successful. Were they more successful, Aaron, buddy, than you thought they would be? Did you know people would take the time to see every single cake?
You know, we had great hopes. We actually, a lot of our work was done by volunteers for STL 250, and we had an office volunteer while we were putting the final touches on Cake Way to the West, and she had a great plan. She was going to go to every cake with a friend. They were going to take a big spoon and act like they were taking a big bite of the cake. So I think people had those plans, and we had those hopes, but it's amazing how much people really latched onto it and got behind it.
And I should say, you were the executive director of STL 250. But I'm sure, okay, so the cakes, there was obviously more to it. This was fun. This I think had some substantial impact on people. The pride, that's nothing to forget about. No. But what was the overall goal? What did you want STL 250 to be? What was the purpose of this birthday?
Yeah, so STL 250 is an organization, has about 150 core volunteers, and they're people who love St. Louis. They're business owners, they're civic leaders, they're individual citizens, and what they really wanted to do was to give St. Louis a platform to stop, reflect on our past, stop and really recognize where we are in our present, and have a chance to look to where we're going. So all of the programs that we designed really had a focus on inclusion and diversity, and really giving St. Louis a lot of ways to interact with itself and to have those conversations.
And what else? Remind us what else went on besides the cakes. I guess the
Yeah.
the mayor. I forgot to point out. I believe this. I think this got a few eye rolls and a few cheers. So I don't know how people feel about this,
Yeah.
but I believe the mayor named the cakes the person of the year.
Tell you what, the power of social media.
Yeah.
I mean, so our cake lovers out there really rallied behind the possibility of being on that ballot, and they took the cake.
That's an excellent point. I should point out the mayor himself did not decree this. It was a vote.
Yeah.
But remind us what else went on. What else did you? What were the vehicles to try to accomplish what you just laid out there?
So our plan ranged from grassroots to grand scale. We reached out to about 3,000 organizations and asked them how they wanted to celebrate, and basically said we're going to have a special calendar. So if you connect your event to the 250th, either in theme or subject matter, we'll advertise it on our calendar. And we had about 500 that took us up on that. So we had events that ranged everything from symposia and galas all the way to trivia nights with a St. Louis theme, the celebration of the 100th anniversary, the first cocktail party that was here in St. Louis, and just really great things. In the birthday weekend, we had a series of events that STL 250 really planned to give that cold February weekend a boost. So we had the Burn and Love Festival, originally intended to be Valentine's Day, but St. Louis's weather made that delay for a couple of days, so we went from ice to 60 degrees in a 3-day time and had a great time on Art Hill for Burn and Love. We had a wonderful reenactment in City Hall. It was a reenactment of our founding. It was attended by dignitaries from Quebec, from France, from the Osage Nation, and really was just a wonderful way to mark that historic moment in our time. And then as we move forward throughout the year, you know, Cake Way to the Rest unfolded, as did all of these hundreds of other really wonderful activities.
We have some historians coming up on the show, and we'll ask them this question as well. But what, to you, is the value in all of this?
Yeah, I think the best thing was the combination of something like Cake Way to the West and 500 events that went on throughout the year, and where it intersected with social media. I think that we really saw St. Louis having a conversation with itself, and sometimes a debate with itself, about all of these places that they were going and things that they were seeing and opinions that they had about what our past meant and what our present meant, and where we could and should be going. And I think that social media intersected in lots of different ways throughout the year.
Of course, at one point, tell me what we should make of this. If anything, is at one point you decided no longer to take on that position and kind of moved out of that role.
Yeah.
What happened there? Was that a sign that people didn't want to party with you?
No, oh my gosh, please. No, I always love to go to a party. I don't think that they could turn me away if they wanted to.
I didn't mean that you're an uninvited guest, you're an unwelcome guest. I meant maybe that everyone
Yep.
didn't want to celebrate the birthday the way that STL 250 did. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you know, so our plan really was kind of front-loaded throughout the year. So
Okay.
we had our biggest events in February. We had Cake Way to the West that really, most of the cakes were already unveiled and in place by about the middle of the year. And what the board really realized was that we could move forward with a volunteer executive director and that good heavy lifting that the rest of our volunteers were doing. So the party continued as the cakers and the folks who came to first night and the other events through the year could really tell you.
Was it hard to party, if you will, sticking with the analogy, after August?
Yeah.
After I hate to say Ferguson like it's a verb or something, but was it hard to party after August?
You know, I think that moment in time when Michael Brown was shot was a tragedy for everybody. I think that the conversations and the activities that happened after it really has St. Louis taking a different look at itself in a way that is much more visible than it has been before. So while I think a birthday celebration can be a party, it can also be that moment to really reflect on who we are and where we're going. And so I think those conversations that happened after Michael Brown's death, after the unrest in Ferguson and continue to today are really great conversations, and they're necessary for us to really grow as a region.
Do you think we would plan a party differently now than we did this time last year?
Oh, you know, I think absolutely. I think every time that you do have new experiences, that you do have changing situations, they're going to inform how we see ourselves and how we want to interact with our past and our present and our future. I would certainly hope that the 300th anniversary looks a lot different than the 250th anniversary in all kinds of ways.
Is it anything next? Is STL 250 done and over with, or is there
Yeah.
is that spirit live in any other incarnation?
You know, so you interviewed a couple of our cakers. The STL, or the St. Louis 250 Cake Lovers Group, is really continuing some energy around the cakes. We have a plaza to build around the statue of Pierre Laclede downtown, and so STL 250 will be continuing to get that done. You know, but we were always intended to be a temporary organization, really brought together just for the purpose of the anniversary year.
What happens to the cakes?
Ooh, so about 80 or so of the cakes found private homes in an auction that we did over the holidays. The rest of the cakes really were up to the host locations to decide what they wanted to do with. Some kept them, added them to their collection. Some are still on display. Some have been donated to the Cake Lovers Group.
You mentioned auction. Just real quick, talk money with me for a second. I mean, someone. You can't throw a party for nothing.
Yes.
Somebody wanted to do this. Are we
Absolutely.
in the hole on this, or was this state money?
No,
Give me the
no.
thumbnail sketch of the
Yeah,
the finances.
100% privately funded.
Okay.
From foundations, corporations, and individuals. Budget came in at just over $1 million for the activities, the cakes, paying the artists to decorate them, creating an app using one of our Arch Grants companies. You know, it's successful and in the black.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for a very successful cake adventure for a lot of people, but
There
also
you
I
go.
think even those who maybe didn't take pictures of them got a kick out of them, and most importantly, as we discussed, learned about our region. Maybe our pride swelled just a little bit as well. Don't go anywhere.
Thanks.
We're going to come right back after we take a look at what you will have to say about our 250th birthday and our 250th year. Hashtag stay tuned, STL. Okay, Aaron stayed with us, and John Wright, an author, historian, and educator as well, as we've learned before on the show, joins us, as well as Gwen Moore, curator with the Missouri History Museum. That's right. So I love to talk history. Can we give a little context maybe to the idea of a city celebrating its milestone? Have we done this before in St. Louis?
We had the bicentennial in 1964. We had a celebration. Yes, we did. So this is not the first one.
And if they had, and I'm sure we've had even more before that.
I'm sure.
Do they, you know, we talked.
That's the one I remember.
Remember reading about. What are the goals? Are there often goals attached to these? Are there stories you can tell us, give us some context, or how we've celebrated in the past?
You know, I can't remember. I just remember books going out. I remember emblems and decals. And I guess I was so busy getting out of school when the centennial took place, my thoughts were not on what we were going to do and what we were doing.
How were your thoughts different as an adult? What did you think about STL 250? What, as I ask Aaron, what's the value in a city, in a region, looking back?
I think it gives us a chance to reflect on our history and to get some direction for the future. We can take that history and move forward, and it gives us some clues of where we need to go.
Same question.
I would have to totally agree. I mean, one of the goals that we wanted to do at the History Museum is that we wanted to show the richness and the diversity of the city. Not just the racial and ethnic and religious diversity, but the economic diversity of the city. And we wanted to look at that through looking at the lives of 50 people. We wanted to look at 50 places, 50 objects, 50 images. And it was quite successful. I think we had like over 400,000 people come and see that exhibit that opened in February, and it's closing in February of this year. So it's been very successful, and I think what we wanted to do is just highlight how far we have come in those 250 years and how much further we have to go in the next 250.
Well, what surprised you? Did you learn something that you didn't know about St. Louis?
Let me think. I don't want to let you know that I don't know everything there is to know about St. Louis history. This was a very unique exhibit because we had like about a year to put it together. Usually we plan exhibits 3, 4, 5 years in advance of the date it's opening, and we had like a year to get this up and running, and everybody participated. You're talking about a team effort. Practically everybody in the museum, not just the curators, but we had people that were in resource protection giving us ideas and who they thought was important. And everybody got to have some input about who we thought were the kind of people that should be in this exhibit, the kind of places, the kind of objects. It was just really a great experience. And one thing I learned is that people can work together and work well together, more so than I guess about the history of St. Louis. When you've been studying history of St. Louis for so long, and I don't know everything, I'm not going to even say I know everything, but yeah, it was quite an experience.
Well, what was the response? Did you see a common theme of a response of people who came through to see it?
Most people were surprised. A lot of people said, I never knew that about St. Louis. I never knew our history was like this. And some of the people that we had there, because we didn't want to go with the same people that the usual suspects. Everybody had a chance to say who they thought should be in that exhibit. For example, one of the people that I wanted to see in that exhibit was Kenneth Billups, which a lot of people don't think of as being, well, I think he's very important to developing musical talent to St. Louis, contributed so much to St. Louis. He's not a rich white male. He was a black music teacher, and he trained countless numbers of musical talent, founder of the Legend Singers. And there were unexpected people. We just didn't want the usual suspects, the founders. Of course, there were some rich white males in there, some rich white females, but we also wanted diversity. We wanted to show, like I said, the richness and diversity of the city of St. Louis and talk about our history.
Didn't people have a chance to actually write in
Yes.
somebody that they didn't see that they wished was there?
Yeah, that was another thing, because when people came and they would say, well, that person's not there, and I think they're important. And so we did have a 51st person so that we could highlight that person that wasn't included in the original exhibit.
Did we do a good job of telling our story?
I think so. I think we have a story to tell, more to tell. I'm working on a project with Webster University Press called Ethnic St. Louis. I didn't realize how diverse St. Louis was. We see St. Louis mostly as black-white, but there's so many ethnic groups. I've been to so many festivals and dinners and celebrations that I didn't know existed because we've been so closed in. We're wrestling with this black-white thing, and the city is going way beyond that. One day we're going to wake up and find out we're more than black and white. We are a mosaic of many ethnic groups and cultures that make up this great city.
Do you feel like we, was that highlighted? Was that a goal? And do you feel like we were successful? Were you satisfied with the way we told our story?
You know, I think that we gave people every opportunity that they could have to be able to tell it in a lot of different ways. So we were really mindful about where we put the cakes. And one of the ways that we were mindful was that we wanted to make sure that ethnically we were representing the region. And so we, had a cake down by the Bevo Mill in the heart of the Bosnian community. We had a cake on South Grand, really in recognition of the Vietnamese who really had come in and really made that a vibrant part of town again. I also think, every day on our Facebook page, which ended up with about 11,000 or so followers, we partnered with the History Museum and put out a This Day in St. Louis History that told that story in a lot of different ways and really got a lot of people telling the story back and saying, hey, I remember that, or hey, I really didn't even know that, or you just taught me something about my family that I wouldn't have known.
So when you're having a year-long celebration and you're talking about this day in history, and along comes a day in history, I'm just curious, as historians, as residents and people who are for the city, and when I say city, I mean the region as well, how did you have a program figured out for the entire year, and then something comes along like August that's going to be, I'll leave it to you to say, but likely in the history books of our region.
Absolutely.
Just how did you, were you able to incorporate that in last year's story, in the St. Louis story, or how do you see it going forward in our story?
Well, it's an important part of our story, and we're definitely going to incorporate it in an upcoming exhibit that we're working on at this very moment. It's about civil rights in St. Louis, and we see the Ferguson unrest as part of that civil rights narrative, and it's going to be included. And right now, we're in a collecting initiative. We're collecting objects, papers from Ferguson. We're doing a Ferguson oral history project, and that's all going to be an important part of the History Museum and the way we present the history of St. Louis. It's a very important part of our history.
I think for the first time, we're in an era where history is not hidden. And we can learn from it. Some say it's a new Selma, and we celebrate Selma as a changing turning point in our history. Mike Brown's situation could be a turning point in St. Louis's history and national history if we learn from it. And I think we will learn from it. I think things will never be the same again in many ways because of this situation.
If you all can stick around, we're going to bring you back at the table, but for now we want to hear a little bit more of what folks are saying with hashtag Stay Tuned STL.
Thank you.
Well, let's just pick up the conversation where we just were with some new guests with different perspectives. Todd Swanstrom from University of Missouri St. Louis is back on the program, as is Patricia Bynes, the Democratic Committee woman who really a lot of people got to know on Twitter and on everything from Channel 5 to CNN, starting back in August. You were very active in Ferguson. And Justin Hansford, who we've also seen very active in your role as a professor in the St. Louis University Law School and in other ways. So if we were going to schedule and celebrate STL 250 now, how might it be different, or do you think it was representative of our current history as we know it before now?
I think we'd have to make a few changes and maybe tackle some subjects that maybe they weren't thought about or wanted to include before, but we can't ignore anymore. Just to make sure that we give a really good representation of the history and the future that's coming for St. Louis and the St. Louis region.
Did it? I mean, some people might say that, boy, we were doing great, and then Ferguson happened. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think that that's one of the reasons that Ferguson is so important, because many thought that we were doing great, and Ferguson sort of was a surprise. But so for members of the African American community in particular who have lived under this cloud of predatory policing and racial profiling for many decades, it was a turning point where they were able to have their narrative become part of the broader narrative. And I think that was a real change in St. Louis history. We're going to see how it changes things going forward.
Are people comfortable with that change in narrative?
Well, I think, you said things were going great. Well, in some ways, we should be proud of what happened because we really crystallized an issue that the entire country is talking about now. In fact, all over the world, it's not this kind of abuse of policing, this kind of lack of accountability, exists in many other places. It's immigrants, it's, all sorts of different manifestations. So, usually St. Louis is like, somebody once said, we're so average, it's weird, But in this case, we're on the cutting edge. I mean, we really got out front of something and forced people all over the country to address an issue that they hadn't really thought about.
Right.
But it's not hard to find some folks who are worried that our image is tarnished. It's not hard to find, and I'm talking to people who have, you might consider, I don't know, for lack of a better term, open minds and big hearts, who are worried that if we don't get this right, that we're going to be headed in the wrong direction. That this was a fragile city to begin with that was doing its best to promote its startups.
Well, I was going to say, I had a chance to go to the United Nations with Mike Brown's parents, and it's true that even in Geneva, Switzerland, they're talking about this. And so the region is potentially going to face long-term repercussions for its image unless it turns the corner. And I think one thing that really separates this incident from past incidents of unrest is we've had a number of youth leaders step up. People have been active in the community trying to make a change. People are now going to the halls of power. Politicians are stepping up and trying to make change. So we're not going to just leave it there at what happened to Mike Brown. We're trying to turn the corner and turn this into a story with a happy ending, so to speak.
I think it's important to realize that when people said things were going great, they weren't. There are many people now who are aware of what's going on, and they're being faced to force these issues, because these aren't new issues in the Black community. These are just conversations that we've continued to have that have not been addressed. So if we're worried about an image, let's deal with reality, and the image will take care of itself.
Well, I think what's interesting about this is people don't make a differentiation in the rest of the country and the rest of the world between Ferguson and St. Louis. What happened in Ferguson applies to St. Louis. And we all know Ferguson is one small community of 21,000 and a metropolitan area of 2.8 million, but people don't make that distinction. So what we should have learned from this is that every community matters to the region. If we as a region, if the parts aren't happy, the whole is not going to be happy.
And is this, I think I know the answer to this, but I'll leave it to you guys to opine. I mean, this could have easily been called name your other suburban town or other city. Ferguson itself may not have stood out for any other reason.
Right.
Above any other, fair?
Easily.
Yeah, in fact, in some ways, Ferguson, is a larger than some communities, probably has made some progress in certain areas that other communities have not made. So it's really somewhat arbitrary that Ferguson is where this erupted, but it represents a whole series of communities in St. Louis and then all over the country again.
Right.
So it's well, you can see the universe in a grain of sand. You can see a lot of issues in one community, and it represents a lot of truths about what's going on.
So is it too soon? You talk about young leaders are stepping up. How can you make some predictions on the history books here for us? Is it too soon to see where our story is going? How will we celebrate 300 in St. Louis? What would the story look like then?
Well, I think we have a very exciting opportunity in St. Louis County, but specifically Ferguson, for the April 7th election. There are 3 council seats that are coming up, so we're going to have a chance to see if all the conversation about voting and getting engaged and staying engaged is able to stick, not just in Ferguson, but just like Ferguson is representative of all these other communities, if they're stepping up to the plate too to make it happen, we've got to get involved at the policy level with elections and make sure good people are getting in office and keep them accountable to what they say they're going to do.
Right, I agree. I think we have to make sure that we don't allow this to be a moment, but we turn it into a movement. And the way that you do that is you find the next step and the next step, and you try to create a pathway towards real, sustainable, structural change. And so I think the young leaders are stepping up. They're still engaged. We're going on 6 months after the killing of Mike Brown. And I think 6 years from now, I think it's really something to be excited about, to wonder how these youth leaders who are 20, 21, 22 years old, who are being invested in from people around the country who have had national media exposure, how will they represent St. Louis? How will they change St. Louis 6 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? I think it's a really exciting time to think about.
Yeah, because there are a lot of people that I would guess didn't imagine themselves in these kinds of roles. Did you imagine yourself in the role you found yourself in? Obviously, you were involved in politics to some degree, but
Right.
I mean, do you have the energy to sustain your involvement?
Not only do I have the energy, I have the responsibility to do so. I don't think that you can see something like this happen and begin to walk away. So while we might not know whose fault it is, it doesn't matter. We all have responsibility to help change this.
Well, I think Justin put his finger on, if you talk about 50 years from now, what will be different. I think we need structural change. You use the word structure. I think we need institutional change, which is to say the communities in North County have to start collaborating across these small municipalities We also probably need new institutions. We need foundations that and nonprofits that learn how to operate in this suburban environment, which is very different than the city environment. So if we don't change structurally and institutionally, I think it'll be, frankly, it could be kind of a burnout. You know, the energy, it's very difficult when you have institutions that don't have the capacity and the reach and the, you know, to really address the problem. So it's going to have to be structural change.
Do we need some sort of wholesale change? I'm just thinking about the way, you know, society, you tell me how societies are built, but they, you know, sometimes on a little patchwork basis, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, it'd be great if our power lines were underground instead of tangled over the streets.
Right.
There was some tangled stuff, some would argue, in our duplication of services and other things of that nature.
Right.
Do we need someone with a grand plan and a grand vision for how life can be better for everyone?
Yeah, I don't think there'll be one individual who will have a grand plan from the mountaintop, so to speak. I think that there have been some initial positive steps, civilian review boards, amendment to the state's Racial Profiling Act, body cam. Some people are for that. I'm personally against it, but it's something that people are considering. Those are baby steps, but I think the big change is going to be, are we going to look at our communities of color, our black and brown communities, as citizens, no longer as targets? And so the way to do that is to take a human rights perspective on how we look at members of our region, and we're going to have a commitment towards being more inclusive for everyone. So it is going to take a huge transition, a huge change of policing culture, political culture, civic engagement, and I think if we do all those things, we'll be just fine.
You mentioned body cameras, and you're not for them. I mean, if folks can't even agree on body cameras, there are a lot of different elements to what we've been talking about for the past 6 months. Can you do that without some sort of centralized leadership of some kind? There's a lot of different issues with a lot of different leaders.
Democracy is messy, Casey.
Right.
It's not neat.
Right.
There's not going to be a top-down solution, and you know we're not going to know how this scenario plays out. But you know, throughout American history, I mean, I have faith in American democracy. It's going to be messy. It's going to be conflictual, and it's going to be unpleasant.
And do we
at
not
times.
know that because we haven't experienced that in our lifetimes necessarily? Any
No,
messiness?
think about the 60s and 70s. A lot happened, and I think it brought issues to the fore, and we addressed things. We made a 90-degree turn in the 60s with the victories of the civil rights movement. I think, we now are in a situation where we have a new set of issues that it's race and economics, intertwined, which makes it in some ways more difficult. But we shouldn't forget that we've made major history here. And, you can register to vote, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
literally, 50 years ago, a large part of the black population of the United States was disenfranchised forcefully, from voting.
Is it marginalized people regardless? You said race and economics. Is it marginalized that we're talking about here, and that might cover multiple people?
I think there are a lot of people who do not participate in the political process. When you look at the number of people who come out to vote in municipal elections across the country, it's not just a low turnout in Ferguson or in St. Louis County. Most people traditionally do not vote other than in November elections. That is a mindset that has to change regardless of what their income level is. So that's something internal in our country that we need to change and let people know. I've been telling people, run down the halls of City Hall. That's where we need to start, is at the ground level at City Hall. Then we can work ourselves up to DC.
Yeah, and I think the question of economic justice is central to this whole entire conversation. We have a huge wealth gap and a huge amount of inequality in our society. I think nationally we have an average African American household with about $5,000 in wealth,
right.
Average white household with nearly $100,000 in wealth. Yep. And so these are huge gaps. Mm-hmm. And so we see, the phrase Black Lives Matters is important because those huge gaps in wealth translate into huge gaps in political access, huge gaps in social capital, huge gaps in quality of life. And then one of the way it manifests is in policing, and which communities can be over-policed, which communities can be targeted for predatory policing and ticketing so that you can fill your municipal coffers. All of these different sites of inequality combine to create just a horrible situation for black and brown communities and marginalized communities. So there's a lot of work to do.
So it's like, back in the civil rights period, people demonstrated in order to be able to sit on the bus, to sit anywhere they wanted on the bus. Well, what if you can sit on the bus anywhere, but there's no bus that goes by your house? Or what if the bus that goes by your house, it's an hour and a half to the first job you can get? Well, then you have the right, but it doesn't really mean much unless it's given real content by having good jobs, good schools, and I think a very important issue in St. Louis is the disparity in household wealth that Justin was talking about. Literally, African Americans have, in the United States, broadly speaking, 5% of white household wealth. And that has to do with this history of only being able to buy in certain neighborhoods in St. Louis. And you can study that.
A lot of that wealth is in your home.
And you could not buy in good neighborhoods. Imagine if you bought a home in, I don't know, Webster Groves or Kirkwood, back in the 50s and 60s, what would it be worth today? In some North county areas, that home hasn't appreciated 1/4 of that amount, right? So you just never got on the bus, right, to really get that household wealth. And all the research shows now that assets are as important as income. If you don't have assets, you can't weather crises. You end up liquidating everything in order to survive. A foreclosure can ruin a family. A health crisis can ruin your family if you don't have assets to fall back on to succeed in American society. It's just a reality.
Let's take a break, and we'll talk a little bit more about St. Louis assets and what we can and what our story is going forward, because that's something you've talked about on this show before, long before Ferguson as well. But we want to hear what you're saying. Hashtag stay tuned, STL. Okay, I say we were talking assets, and then maybe kind of moving forward. Let's talk with a couple of folks who are really plugged into St. Louis. Let me introduce first Emma Clues with the Shaw Neighborhood Association, and Jamie Pisek with Rally STL. We've talked to Rally before. Catch us up to speed on Rally. There's a little bit of difference, a different approach Rally STL has to promoting the city and the region we have here. Give us a thumbnail update.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rally is basically a grassroots organization that wants to empower St. Louis's most vital asset, which is St. Louisans. It all started whenever the founder, Aaron Perlett, posted on Forbes an article called "St. Louis Doesn't Suck" back in 2011.
Yeah, people loved that
exactly.
was yeah.
It was
what year was that again?
It was December of 2011.
Okay. So, yeah. So we really rallied how we're not that bad. That was
Absolutely.
kind of the theme.
Right. And he was so impressed by the outpouring of support to that article that he was inspired to create Rally St. Louis, and which at its core is a crowdsourcing and crowdfunding platform for people in St. Louis to go on, post whatever idea they have of how we can improve the future of St. Louis and give it actually a possibility to happen.
Okay, so we'll get back to that in just a second, and then I want to talk. The Shaw neighborhood has been right in the middle of a lot of what we were just talking about when a young man was shot and killed in an altercation with police and in your neighborhood. And so I guess maybe the question I have for both of you is give me kind of the pulse, give me the mood of St. Louis, having been on the front lines of promoting it, but also living right in the middle of a lot of the unrest.
From the Shaw perspective, I think we're sort of in a place of rolling our sleeves up and digging in to sort of do some of that hard work. Earlier, Todd said that it's really messy, and I think that's fair. We've been doing things like community conversations, open dialogues every other Saturday, where folks can come and really have these hard conversations and start to understand where they're coming from, the diversity of our neighborhood. We've had police representatives at some of those meetings as well. So I think that certainly there was a loss of life, and that's tragic, but I think we've really been trying to ask those hard questions and lean into that mess a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I mean, sometimes when we have these messy, hard conversations, cops can take they can kind of I don't know what the right metaphor is, but nevertheless, it sounds like everyone's against them. But obviously, there are a lot of police officers, I'm sure you've experienced in the neighborhood, who are part of the community as well and want to be there for the community as well.
Right, and I think one way that the Shaw neighborhood really responded to that was in the sense that, immediately after the death of Von Ritt Myers, we had a whole calendar, one of those care calendars set up where people were bringing meals for all of the family members, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, for weeks. And they got so full of food, like, ended up turning neighbors away. So then those neighbors started just packaging up supplies and food, taking them to the local police stations who are also working overtime. When they had enough as well, they were taking them out to protesters. I think that what really amazed and impressed me about my neighbors were that people weren't interested in trying to take sides and figure out who was right or wrong, but really sort of come together as a community and start to try to figure it out about what we could do next.
So people are still committed to St. Louis? Do you see some of the same faces involved? Or people kind of like, you know what, I'm packing up and leaving?
No, absolutely. And we actually started an initiative called Our STL after the events in Ferguson and in Shaw. And what we're doing with that is basically similar to what the goal of Rally STL is to give people a voice and show what good things are being done and the good things people want to do to help make St. Louis a more united, supportive, and exciting place to live. Because the national eye was on us for a long time and still continues to be.
I was going to say, still is, yeah.
And it was really surprising and amazing to us to see how many amazing things were happening on social media, all the good stuff that was happening, people volunteering their time, as Emma mentioned, and working so hard to try to show that St. Louis is this great place, and we are working hard to improve it. So we created Our STL to show what people are doing. It's a website that is basically an aggregate of the hashtag Our STL, and we want to give a voice to those people who are doing great things and continue to reinforce them to do more, and also show people and examples of how they can get involved, which is a hard part sometimes. You're not really sure how you can, but you know you want to.
I'm curious if have you seen actually more people rolling up their sleeves, as you said? Even with Rally, are the clicks still coming through? Are people still engaged, or is it dropped off, or has it gone up?
I think people have sort of reinforced their pride in the city as well. I mean, we had a swell of conversation happening when Rally started, and then you get tired down with your day-to-day life, and you're not always like coming up with ideas on your own. But once the negative attention on St. Louis started happening, people started getting up in arms like, that is not us. We are way more than this. Yes, we have our problems and our issues, and we need to work to fix those, but St. Louis isn't all bad crime stats and et cetera. We are working hard to improve who we are.
Let's just take a quick look. We have talk about a couple of the things Rally has pulled off here. So Cotton Belt people, I don't know if anybody would have, on a large scale, known what the Cotton Belt building was if they weren't friends with Michael Allen on Facebook, who we love, by the way. He's with Preservation Research Office. But tell us about we're seeing it right now on the screen. What is the Cotton Belt? How did you make it what it is today?
Absolutely. So Tom Nagel submitted an idea to Rally St. Louis just like anyone else could, that he wanted to take this rundown building that's on the riverfront that people see when they come in from Illinois and turn it into a beautiful work of art. So he submitted the idea, it got a ton of support on the website and went into funding, which he was very successful at. And we started painting in September using local artist Anita Turnage. And the whole goal of it basically is to show people who are coming to St. Louis possibly for the first time traveling through the country that we have a very vibrant arts community, and it's not just this rundown building that you're seeing on the riverfront. And also to encourage people to go out to the riverfront and explore their city more and see what it has to offer.
Yeah, but we were talking about where the cakes might have taken people. We're definitely disconnected, and obviously we have the Arts Grounds renovation, they're working on that, but we were definitely disconnected from the river. I think we would all agree. One more we have. We want to show branded crosswalks. Remind us what you guys were doing there.
Yeah, so branded crosswalks is an idea that's currently in funding. It's an idea submitted just to create more activity in life in neighborhoods around St. Louis and to enforce civic pride at the same time. So by creating more painted crosswalks like this that show the identity of St. Louis with the fleur-de-lis, we can encourage people to get out, encourage pedestrian life and visit more parks and businesses and be more engaged in their community. So that is an idea that's currently in funding on the website, and if it is completely funded, then it will be actualized shortly.
So we're sprucing up. That's important, and not just for looks, but as you said, to highlight the arts community, connect to the river. But now, do you get the sense that now what we're talking about almost has like a moral calling behind it as well? Is there a larger purpose of what we've taken on here?
I think so, and from a neighborhood perspective, I think a lot of people are doing a lot of work on themselves on an individual level also. I know we've been using, the Shaw neighborhood uses the nextdoor.com platform, which is a social network for neighbors, sort of a secure, a little more private. And there are lots of really hard conversations going on there, as well as in those in-person meetings about, learning about terms like white privilege, or what does that mean, and reading articles about some of the things that other folks are going through, maybe that are their neighbors that they really had no idea before.
Right back to the cake analogy. You might discovering a new part of town, getting outside of your geographic bubble, and perhaps even your own personal one as well.
Absolutely.
Do you see that?
Absolutely. And also, I wanted to bring up today that we had some pretty exciting news that the first idea that was fully funded on Rally's website, the Food Roof, working with Urban Harvest STL, they just signed a lease today, so they will be starting construction in March to create St. Louis's first downtown food farm and roof, and start working on that. So it's very exciting.
Very cool. All right, ladies, thank you so much. Don't move. We're going to bring everyone back to the table, and we're going to bring more of what folks are saying with hashtag Stay Tuned STL into the conversation. We'll be right back. So I'll open this up to all of you. Maybe I'll pick on Justin first because he's the closest to me. But that conversation kind of sounded a little bit like what we might have had this time last year. Remember, we love to talk about startups. We love to talk about, and I'm not minimizing anything, but we were painting things, or we were starting things, and things of that. It was kind of out in the clouds a little bit, but now it is a little more in the gut. Can we do both?
Oh, we have to do both, because I think the idea of social innovation and social enterprise is really where our society is going in the future, in the 21st century. So we saw how the internet and how Twitter and how all these social media innovations played such a major role in the aftermath of Ferguson in allowing people to connect and organize and make change happen in real time. So these social innovations are going to collide with efforts for social change, and I think that's what we're going to see over the next 5-10 years really take off and make things different.
Can we do both? Can we continue to have fun and do the messy work? I don't know. Am I off on to nothing here?
I think we have to. I think we're a diverse enough community. There will always be different pockets of us, whether we're a neighborhood that's struggling or a demographic group that's struggling, or a different way of categorizing ourselves. So we have to have those tough conversations, but we also have to be able to reflect on what we love about the communities that we work in and that we live in, and that without that balance, I don't think we're doing justice.
Well, I think there's this theory of the creative class, that there are these, innovative people, these professionals who you need, and there's a certain truth to that. There's definitely innovation, creativity, being on the cutting edge of technology is key for regional economic growth. But we, as a region, we need to make sure that wealth gets spread, that everybody has a function in the economy. You also need people who are going to run the restaurants. You need people who are going to take care of the streets. You need all sorts of different people to make a well-functioning society. So sometimes I fear we kind of, kowtow or worship, this creative class as everything. And I think we have to watch out for that, but we recognize that they perform an important role, but everybody else performs important roles too. And we need to, the way I look at it is we have the central corridor in St. Louis that I think is sort of taking off and booming with a lot of high tech and a lot of innovation and arts and other things. But that wealth needs to be spread north and south to the communities north and south.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of people have said that doesn't include everyone by any stretch. And that cuts across race as well.
Right, and I think there's a fear among people that, there's just one segment that's going to move ahead. And we, fortunately, according to my research, we don't really have the kind of hot market that's displacing low-income people from these communities. We still have an opportunity to grow, to gentrify, if you will, and not displace if we do it right. If we have policies in place to have affordable housing, to have job opportunities, we can do it right in St. Louis. And in some ways, we're lucky, right? We're not Seattle and New York, where they've already pushed a lot of the low-income and minority people out of many neighborhoods, right? Because they've just become too hot.
Mm-hmm. You don't. Yeah, I've heard someone say you don't go to New York to make it. You go there if you've already made it.
That's right.
Anymore. Historians, we look back so we don't repeat our mistakes. Are we repeating mistakes right in front of our very eyes right now?
In some places we are. We have to learn that we don't have options. If not, there'll be another Ferguson. And it's up to us to make sure there aren't any more Fergusons. And we have the opportunity to make that happen. And the question is now, do we have the will to do it? That's the question. There's some individuals who don't, but I think there are more of us who have the will, but we can't rest. I think many people think it'll sleep, we'll go back to business as usual, but we can't let that happen if we're going to have a great St. Louis.
Do you give us your perspective on the same question? Are we repeating mistakes, or are we moving in a different direction?
I don't know if we could say we're repeating mistakes. I see history as being all about change. And we always say it's change over time. I focus on social activism, and I look at these movements over time. And I think one of the problems that we've had with we talk about the end of the civil rights movement happening in 1968, but the struggle didn't stop in 1968. That was just a date we chose when a lot of those legal barriers were destroyed, Jim Crow. But we can't stop organizing. And you always have to see this as a continuing struggle. And it has to keep going. It does not end. And I sometimes think that there was a vacuum after 1968 or after the 1970s with the Black Power movement, where there wasn't that real, we weren't in the street as much. And I think you have to always keep struggling. Now, the struggle changes. You don't always have to be with a placard, but you can't stop the fight. The fight has to always go on, and always keep your eyes on the prize. You always have to fight. You always have to struggle, and you can never think that you've arrived, or if you've made, or you achieved your goals, because as we can see, we have not achieved those goals.
And I see you nodding. I mean, the struggle or the fight, I guess, maybe is it always, as you said, doesn't always come with a sign, but it might be on that secure website you talked about, where neighbors are having honest conversations with each other. Is that struggle sustainable?
I think the piece that I've really been interested in is that there is no one certain answer. There is no one silver bullet solution to this, but this continued conversation is so important. And the minute that people start to go back to business as usual, let it die away, precisely to your point, I think that's really a huge issue. And I've been thrilled to see, at least on our very tiny corner of St. Louis, those conversations are still happening. The protests are not happening in our neighborhood, but we're still getting together regularly to think about what we need to be doing. Do we need a youth council in our neighborhood? What are the things that we can do to address this from a neighbor to neighbor level?
And when we say business as usual, I don't know, maybe some people that's not a bad thing to some folks. Maybe business as usual, maybe comfort is the enemy here, like just kind of complacency, regardless of what your station in life is. That's even if we're talking about successful rally projects, successful art at the airport or whatever, maybe just comfort is the enemy.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. I think after the legal barriers were they knocked those out the way, people wanted to enjoy what they had achieved, and they got comfortable. And that generation, I think many of them are looking back right now and saying, okay, we didn't push the ball forward like we needed to. And so that's what got us where we are right now. For many people who want to go back to business as usual, things were probably fine for them as far as the economy, as far as business, as far as race issues. They probably didn't think that they existed, or maybe the things that we're trying to change were actually helping to protect them. But things have got to change, because I think the world can see now that there was a lot of inequity going on, and that's what we're fighting against.
Cakers, what are you going to do now that the cakes are not to be discovered? Where can we put a cake that you would like to visit?
Oh man, I would love to go to Build-A-Bear Workshop. That would be fantastic.
Oh, very good. Okay.
My answer for that.
We may have some pull there. I don't know.
Yeah.
The list goes on as far as cakes that, or places that deserved cakes, but as far as, what's next, I'm just going to go revisit some of these places, because there's a lot of museums and such things that I did not get to visit during my hunt.
This has changed you, it sounds like.
It has.
Yeah.
Fair? Okay. All right, guys, hang on. We're going to keep talking online just a little bit. That's when we'll get really honest. No more beating around the cake here. Stay tuned, .9net.org. Join us there. Thanks, everybody. Questions for the last table. We wrote all your names down, but we didn't write any questions down for the last table. So what should we have said? You started us off. Maybe help us come full circle.
What should we have said? So.
Sorry, what did I not ask?
Like
Sorry, this has been falling off the entire time. Let me just put that back there. Sorry.
I like this conversation about does celebration have to be mutually exclusive to
celebration
protest?
So you can still sing. You can still promote our startup scene while wrestling with racial inequity.
I think we have to, because I think we have to see opportunity to be able to want to fight the fight and keep after it. I mean, we have to be able to see that there's a better future or a different position to be attained. And then I think we also need fuel for that fight. And sometimes fuel comes from anger or injustice, and sometimes it comes from love of your community and where you are. And so I don't think that those two are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, this time last year we were trying to distinguish ourselves from, I don't know, Louisville or Austin or Portland or something. I guess we
did it.
Done that.
We've got our chance, I guess. Anyway, we've got our. I mean.
Well, I just think that to follow up on Aaron's point, I think that. It changes, it requires, the protest movements created tension. The whole point is to create the tension. It makes people uncomfortable, I recognize that, but that's how you change, and that's life. You need that tension is there. We also need to relax and enjoy it and have fun, right? So you can do both. And every silver lining has its cloud, right? Every time you solve a problem, you get a new set of problems, right? That's life. You never really have solved it ever completely.
Right.
And if we did, life would be pretty boring, wouldn't it? Right. So it's not boring, at least. I think we can say there's lots of challenges for us.
We didn't really touch on crime at all tonight, but that has changed over the last year. At least maybe it's a statistical anomaly or something we're going through here, but violent crime anyway. I've heard anecdotally from folks in business downtown that potential employees have withdrawn their application because they don't want to work downtown after X number of people have been involved in violent crime. Is that part of?
We have a high unemployment rate. We have the prison system that keeps circulating individuals out who can't get jobs, can't get housing, can't get an education, who are determined they're going to make it by any means necessary. And we live in two worlds, basically. We have highways that people can drive down, go out of their driveway, never see the problems of the city.
Right.
As far as they're concerned, it doesn't exist. until there's an explosion. And so we have to keep that ugly side always before us so we don't get comfortable in our own surroundings, feeling that there's another world out there we're going to have to address. And we can't rest until it's addressed. And some people say, I don't want to hear that. You're going to have to hear it.
Right.
You're going to have to hear it.
And I was going to say also, we have efforts going on from some of the young activists. For example, there's a group called Hands Up United that just this past weekend created a coding program for young disadvantaged youth who want to learn how to engage in using technology to create web pages and create computer programs. So these are going to be jobs for them once they finish that program and can go out into the workforce, and they can then be part of the innovation and the technology revolution that's happening in society. Now, I was trying to think of a way to combine Ferguson and cakes. I wasn't able to think of that, but I do think that all of these issues in Ferguson are going to be places where there are intersections with emerging technologies, with employment, with healthcare, with politics. So I think the thing that's going to keep Ferguson vibrant in 2015 is the fact that all aspects of our region's political and social and cultural life are going to meet in Ferguson. And so I think we'll be better off for it. I think our region will be better off if we have more young people who are engaged in their education, who are engaged in the employment market, so that they can add their talents to the talent pool and help our region be stronger. So it's definitely not a situation where people should be wistful for the good old days where these problems stayed out of the headlines. It's really an opportunity to enrich our region and allow more of our youth to be part of the solution.
And whatever you think of any particular situation, I believe it's been proven by research that we remember things better than they were anyway. Whether it be relationships or jobs that you wanted to quit previously and now you wish you had them back or something like that. So maybe the good old days weren't even as good as those who might think they were. Well, I've kept you all up very late tonight. Anything else, any final thoughts from anyone else at the table?
You know what I
W.E. Du Bois said.
Oh, sorry. We have time for 3 more final thoughts.
W.E. Du Bois said it, it's written on his tombstone. In time, everything always works out for the good, but time can sometimes be long. It's up to us to speed up the time if we want to, hear.
Because real people's lives are at stake, so to speak.
Can I say something about crime?
Yes, because I saw the way you looked at me when I said that. You did not seem happy.
No, I just wanted to say something that might seem somewhat controversial, but we got to seriously look at our gun culture in this country. A lot of this violent crime is related to guns, and I know there's this very controversial, the Second Amendment people, but it's something that we have to seriously look at, seriously examine, and not shy away from it.
We do a whole show on this, but perhaps look at it differently depending on where you live too. I don't know. Perhaps just in terms of the role guns play in different environments. I don't know.
Well, overall violent crime is down. I mean, people's perception of crime. So we're living in a moment right now where we've had these very prominent in the media crimes, and
over the last 6 months of last year.
Disturbing, yeah. But if you look at overall over the last about decade. Violent crime is down about 40% in the city. I realize murders are up slightly in the city this year, but the cities are always dangerous places. They've been throughout history, right? But people go to them because they're exciting, because that's where the action is. Things are happening. So I think there's kind of a false impression here that it's kind of Chicken Little, the sky is falling, but. We'll see that this has happened throughout American history. These waves and this perception that things are out of control in this particular moment. And of course, it's related to the fact that there's almost this feeling that are the police going on strike? Are they not? Like the police in New York, who essentially did a sick out for a few days, right?
90% reduction in tickets or something like that.
Exactly. So I mean, there's a feeling. Oh boy, are we heading down? I think. When we see it in perspective, I think we'll see that it's not as bad as people are seeing it right now. There's just been a lot of publicity around a few major incidents.
We still need to seriously examine our gun culture.
I agree.
Okay.
Patricia, I cut you off.
And I would add in any relationship, when you love it, you work on it. And this is what we're doing. We're working and tackling and talking about these issues because we love this place. We love this region. If we didn't, we would continue to ignore it. So the tension that you see, this is love because we want this place to be better for everybody. So I think if people kind of look at it like that, it makes everything make sense.
Everybody hold really still because that's going to be a promo. We're going to need a little padding on the end of the video there, where Patricia just locked it down for us. I appreciate it. I'm sorry. I was meant that as a compliment. I appreciate you tying a nice bow on the end of the show for us there. That's an optimistic way to look at it, and I like it.
And true.
Sorry I messed it up. I was trying to be silly. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you.